The Inside the Rails podcast is supported by Great British Racing and In the Paddock. InThePaddock.co.uk is a great place to start your shared ownership journey. Find racing clubs and syndicates with horses trained locally to you and at a cost that fits your budget using the search tools on the website. Within the Paddock, your ownership journey could start sooner than you think.
Hello, my name is Simon Double and welcome to Inside the Rails, a monthly podcast for horse racing enthusiasts everywhere. And as ever, I'm joined by my co-host, Phil Boyle from BG Racing. Hi Phil, how are you doing?
Hi Simon, excellent, thank you. Been enjoying the change in the weather that we had for a few days in late April. I was golfing yesterday, racing the day before, and of course, chatting to you today. So what's not to like?
Oh, you flatterer, you flatterer. Yes, the weather, it's turned a bit cold again though, hasn't it? And just as the flat turf season swings into gear, typical. Anyway, enough of the weather for now, and on to a very, very sad story. We mentioned in the last episode that jockey Stefano Cherchi had suffered a terrible fall in Australia during a race. Well, after being put in an induced coma for a fortnight, poor Stefano sadly died on the 3rd of April. He was just 23, had his whole life in front of him, and it was so cruelly snatched away. I knew Stefano quite well. He had ridden 4 different horses for me, including the very tricky Tarantino, on whom he won in just the horse's second race. I know Amy and the whole team, trainer Marco Botti, to whom Stefano was very close, and indeed the whole of Newmarket, has been in deep shock at this tragic news, Phil.
Yeah, it's so very sad. And it always gives you a sense of perspective when you lose someone that you know. All of us wish Stefano's family and friends all the very best at what must be a really tough time. Now, moving on to less significant matters, the flat season's now getting into full swing, and I'm guessing you've been checking out all the early action. What's out there that's caught your eye?
So, we've had the Newmarket to Newbury trials for the 1,000 and 2,000 guineas. They're the first 2 of 5 classics during the season. I'm not sure, Phil, we've seen any future Guineas winners in those trials, although there were 1 or 2 nice performances to note. At Newmarket, in the 7 furlong Nell Gwyn Stakes, which is a trial for the 1,000 guineas for the fillies, the odds-on favourite Dance Sequence was beaten a neck by the possibly more fit Pretty Crystal, an 18-1 shot. I'm sure Dance Sequence will come on for the run and experience, and she's a best price 7 to 1/3 favourite for the English 1,000 guineas. The winner, Pretty Crystal, is not in the guineas and would have to be supplemented. In other words, the owner would have to stump up a lot more money as a sort of penalty for entering quite late. The winner of the Fred Darling at Newbury, Folgaria, won nicely, but is being aimed at the French 1,000 guineas. So don't go betting in the English version. The Colts trials for the 2,000 guineas again threw up some surprise results, with Esquire a 16-1 winner of the Greenham Stakes at Newbury, and Hartum a 17-2 winner of the Craven Stakes at Newmarket. However, the horse I'd take out was the runner-up in the Greenham Stakes at Newbury over 7 furlongs, El Bowden, who was 28-1, hadn't run since last June, and he's owned by my first boss in racing, Peter Harris. He's a massive 150-1 shot, and while he probably wouldn't win, he'd give you a run for your money. I have to say, though, Phil, my 2 for the 2,000 guineas are the hot favourite City of Troy, trained by the great Aidan O'Brien, and maybe worth having an each-way look at the second in the betting, Rosalian, who's a best price 5 to 1 shot. I've no real view on the Fillies Classic at this stage.
Nice little preview there. Yeah, I know some people who'd backed Dance Sequence for the 1,000 guineas before she ran in the Nell Gwyn, so I'm sure they'll be hoping that you're right in terms of her coming on for the run and the experience that she gained from there. Away from the Guineas trials, any other horses gone into your notebook?
Well, you know I like to give a mention or 2 to Willie Haggis runners, so I'm not going to disappoint. Here's a couple for you. Economics, who won a mile maiden at Newbury on Saturday on just his second run. Son of Knight of Thunder, this chestnut with a big white face has a future, I'm sure, probably over 1 mile 2 furlongs. He's entered in the Dante Stakes, which is over 1 mile 2 at York, which is a trial for the Derby. He's in the Derby, although I think Willie Haggis has expressed some doubt as to whether he'll get a mile and a half. Another to note from that yard is Wiltshire, who is making his stable debut, and he won the 6 furlongs duty-free handicap at Newbury very nicely. He'd be a sprinter to note, I'm sure. Also, Phil, let me give a mention to Amy Murphy, who has sent 2 two-year-olds to France already this year, and won with both of them. The second winner, Rock Hunter, won a Shanty Maiden by 3 lengths, and over £20,000 to boot. Watch out for him at Royal Ascot. Anyway, I know that you're not done with the jumps yet.
Indeed not. At the time of recording, we've just got through the big end of season meeting at Ayr. We've got a very good card at Sandown this weekend. That will all obviously be done by the time listeners hear this, but having a 3-way battle for the Trainers' Championship between Dan Skelton, Paul Nicholls and William Mullins has definitely improved the quality of the end of season fields and made all of these meetings much more attractive to watch. It's amazing that Willie Mullins looks almost certain to win the Trainers' Championship in this country, despite having far, far fewer runners than the other 2 rivals. But yeah, I guess that's what happens when you win a good chunk of the Cheltenham Festival races and the prize money that goes with those, and then follow that up with the Grand National winner as well.
We'll come back to the National, but I know you were at Cheltenham recently. I guess a different feel to the festival.
It was, yes, but I must admit I loved it. Compared to the festival, the crowds are absolutely tiny, but although I say that, I'm sure the same number of people would still be a decent crowd at one of the smaller courses. There's just loads and loads of space at Cheltenham, so it means there's plenty of room to move around. It's a really knowledgeable crowd. The quality on the track is very good. The racing certainly lives up to Cheltenham standards, and the weather's even good enough for a mid-afternoon ice cream. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And Paddy Brennan, a stalwart of the jumps jockeys weighing room, retired at the meeting, I believe.
Yeah, he did. And it was great that he got to bow out there, at Cheltenham. As I said, it's a really knowledgeable crowd. They gave him a great reception. He stood up in the irons and held his arm aloft when he passed the winning post in front on what some people would say was an appropriately named man of the people on Wednesday. Yeah. It looked like he decided that this was the right time to bow out, and I think everybody pretty much guessed that. So a lot of people headed to the winners' enclosure to greet him back in, but for me, the fact that he was definitely going to retire was confirmed when all the other riders ended up waiting for him to lead them back down the horsewalk in front of the grandstands. And from behind him on all their horses, they struck up an impromptu chorus of "There's Only One Paddy Brennan" as they followed him in. So it was really, really great to see. And weighing room colleagues came out to clap him into the winner's enclosure. He really got a great reception.
Great to see a top jockey like Paddy retiring on his own terms and on a winner. Now, the Grand National. First of all, Phil, can you believe it's 50 years since Red Rum became the first and only horse to win the Grand National and the Scottish Grand National in the same year?
Well, sadly, I can, but only because I remember Red Rum winning the National was probably one of my earliest horse racing memories, and sadly, I know how old I am now.
Right, I'm going to throw a curved ball at you here. Talking of 50-year anniversaries, some listeners may know I used to work on quiz programmes. Here's another 50-year anniversary for you, a music one. This year marks 50 years since which band achieved what?
No, go on, you'll have to help me. I can remember a lot of 70s bands, but wouldn't know what they've done.
I'll give you a clue. Eurovision winner.
That will be ABBA, probably.
Whoa, yes. ABBA winning.
Yeah, Waterloo at the Eurovisions.
Absolutely right. Well done. I know you're quite a few years younger than me. Yes, it's 50 years since ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. Anyway, I digress. Back to the Grand National. Now, as for me, not a great betting heat for yours truly this year. It's normally quite a lucky race for me. But I did get myself out of trouble a little bit by backing Iron Maximus in running. He was travelling better than anything else about 2/3 through the race. But your thoughts on the race, Phil?
I thought it was great. Can't remember seeing so many horses coming to the second last with a chance before, and I thought the race was all the better for that. I know some people commented that it's been turned into just another good handicap chase, but I think that's unnecessarily negative. I thought it was a great showcase for the sport. a lot of people only watch that one race every year, and it was a really good spectacle this year. And in Iron Maximus, I think we had a quality winner, and that catapulted Willie Mullins into the Trainers' Championship race. Provided a great day for all of JP McManus's grandchildren. I saw they were all there to receive the winner's presentation on the podium at Aintree. So, yeah, there was a good old crowd there. In terms of the race conditions, I must admit, I'd like to see the organisers tweak the entry criteria, and purely basing the race on handicap marks, which they do at the moment, whilst it improves the overall quality of the race, I think it can leave some horses out of the mix that could become the story horses. Kitty's Light was one such runner this year. A lot of publicity and media coverage of that before the race. And yeah, that one came close to not making the field due to being too far down the entries. So I'd quite like to see the winners of certain races in the season given a guaranteed spot in the race off whatever handicap mark they have at the time of the National. I think that just adds to the spectacle of the National and also to some of the other races during the season.
I'm somewhat of a purist, so I tend to stick to the handicap marks. But to be fair, you do make an interesting case for winners of certain races competing. That's quite a novel idea, actually. Anything else catch your eye at a 3-day Aintree meeting?
Yeah, it was a good meeting all round. Brighter Days Ahead looked one for the future when she was super impressive at Aintree, and that boosted the form of the Jeremy Scott trained Golden Ace, who listeners might remember I mentioned last month won at the Cheltenham Festival, and in fact she won again at Cheltenham in April very impressively. There were 4 Grade 1 races to kick off the Thursday of the Grand National meeting, and they were all great races. It was good to see Sir Gino win well after missing Cheltenham, and Jerry Colomb went one better in the Aintree race than he did at Cheltenham, proving himself to be the second best staying chaser in the vicinity after Galopin de Champs. I was also impressed with the battling qualities of John Bon, who also missed Cheltenham but got his win at Aintree.
Yes, nice to see John Bon win for Nicky Henderson. Now, what about BG Racing? How have things been?
Yeah, all been going well with my 2. Bella Cavala has got a handicap mark now. She runs at Ludlow tomorrow, which was a bit of a surprise, as it didn't look like she had any chance of getting into the race, but less than expected numbers of runners in some of the other races on the card means they split our race into 3 divisions. So the large number of runners that wanted to run all managed to get accommodated, and that allowed Bella Cavala to make the lineup. It's actually very unusual to have 3 divisions of the same race. I can't really remember seeing it very often before. So
No.
One group of people that will be thrilled with that are the friends and family of a gentleman called Dave News, because they've sponsored the race in his name to celebrate his 60th birthday, and they've now got 3 races named after Dave for the price of 1. So they'll be chuffed with that.
Yeah.
My apologies to listeners that the result will be in the books before they hear this. Whilst I'm hoping Bella Cavala will go better now, though, I'm not expecting her necessarily to win this one, so hopefully people haven't missed too much. And our other horse, Strider, is coming along really well. We should have him back racing in the next couple of weeks, so all good news on the BG Racing front. What about you? How about the Solario runners?
Well, the owners of the Mahartha 2-year-old named him at the beginning of the month, and the winning name was Bohartha. As usual, champagne flowed at the naming day, and I took the owners out to lunch. It wasn't an easy day, as it was the day after Stefano died, but Amy insisted the naming day took place, which I think speaks volumes for her and her staff. It was really a day of mixed emotions, though, because we all watched Amy's Rock Hunter that I mentioned earlier on absolutely bolt up at Chantilly.
Oh, great. And I think you had a trip to Pontefract yesterday to see Bohartha make his debut. How did it go?
Well, on ground he didn't like, it was soft but virtually heavy, over a distance too short, 5 furlongs, at a track that didn't suit. He actually ran quite well to be 6th, beaten just 8 lengths. Jockey Freddie Larson, who's ridden him at home, was more than pleased with the run. So was the trainer Amy Murphy, and so definitely was the racing manager. But we'll wait for the 6 furlong races next month, although he'll be even better over 7 furlongs. Sharp Distinction has been entered for next Sunday at Southall, over 1 mile 6 furlongs in a £20,000 race. I'm sure he'll come on for the run, but he's in good nick at home, working nicely.
Great. All sounds good. And yeah, hopefully both of us and all of our syndicate members have got plenty to look forward to in the coming weeks and months.
And now we can look forward to our special guest, David Jennings from the Racing Post. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very good, very good. Glad to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on Inside the Rails. You're actually the second Irish guest we've had on in a row, because we had Sophie Buckley on in our last episode, but I think you're the first person we've had on actually in Ireland, actually broadcasting from Ireland. So thank you for joining us.
There we go.
Now, you're a journalist, and I think I've got this right, Deputy Ireland Editor at the Racing Post. Is that your main job, or do you write or broadcast for other outlets, David?
It is my main job, yeah. I'm actually, you won't believe this now, but I'm the guts of 20 years with the Racing Post now, which is
wow,
which is kind of gone by in a flash. I started off quite young when I was in college, and just when I finished college, I started doing a little bit of freelancing and a bit of kind of football writing for the Racing Post. We used to do a Gaelic game supplement, and I started off doing that kind of thing, and then gradually that became a little bit more, and I started writing a few features as well, and that progressed into a full-time job. And I think I may be full-time the guts of 14 or 15 years maybe at this stage, but it is my full-time job. That's my main duty. I obviously do a couple of other things as well, and I like to do a bit of broadcasting and hosting of events as well. But that is my main job, and it takes up quite a bit of time.
Now, if we can go back to the beginning in terms of how did you actually get into racing? You touched upon starting to work when you were at college, but what actually got you into horse racing in the first place? What's the David Jennings story?
Well, I don't have a background in racing at all as such. My dad, Pat, my dad's name was actually Pat Jennings, and he was also a goalkeeper, would you believe, which is hard to believe, but he wasn't the Pat Jennings.
I was about to say, gosh.
No, unfortunately not. No, we would have had a much nicer house growing up, I think, if it was the Pat Jennings, but it wasn't. No, but he was actually a goalkeeper, and quite a good goalkeeper, and his name was Pat. But he was interested in racing, and when I say interested, he would go to the local meetings. So we would have I grew up in Navan in County Meath, so Navan would have been our local track. But on our doorstep, you basically have Fairyhouse, you have Bellewstown, Leopardstown is only 45 minutes away, Punchestown is less than an hour, Naas to Curragh. So around that area of Leinster, Meath, Dublin, Kildare, you've basically got the guts of 10 tracks, which is within an hour radius, which is great. And so I started to go and racing with him as a kid. And then my uncle was involved, who was my godfather, was involved with a horse called River Tarquin, who was trained by Jim Draper. He actually won what is now the Paddy Power Chase. It used to be called the Findus back in the day, and it was worth far less money. But that would have been in the kind of mid-90s. So I would have been maybe, 8, 9, 10 years of age. So every time River Tarquin used to run, he won the Tri-Town Chase at Navan as well. He used to always go to that, and then it kind of progressed from there a little bit, probably like everybody else. When they were a child, I used to write out races on a piece of paper and jockeys, and I used to have my own races at home where you'd make obstacles and you'd have a stick as a whip and you'd be racing against yourself, and it just kind of grew from there, and fell in love with Channel 4 racing, Alistair Down, John McQuirrick, Johnny Frankham and Jim McGrath, and just my Saturday always started, I'm sure a few of our listeners will be the same. It always started in the same way. It was Gazzetta Football Italia on a Saturday morning on Channel 4, followed by the morning line. And it was just, Saturday to me was just a perfect day, because you had, that start today with the morning line. Then you'd be looking forward to the racing coming on Channel 4. And then you obviously had the soccer as well on a Saturday. So it was probably Saturdays that really got me into racing. I got that buzz from a very early age, and always loved, watching racing, going to racing, and just everything about it really kind of captured my imagination.
Now, we've mentioned that you work for the Racing Post, based in Ireland. Can you give our listeners a snapshot of your working week as Deputy Ireland Editor? And also, do you get to go racing a lot? That may sound a strange question, but, do you actually get to the course? I think you were at the Curragh at the weekend, but do you go racing a lot as well?
I do, yeah. I get to go racing quite a bit, probably twice a week usually, and certainly at the bigger meetings and bigger festivals, which is great. A snapshot of my week. I'll give you a snapshot of my week at the busiest time of year. So the busiest time of the year for me will be probably after Christmas and the lead up to Cheltenham. That will be my busiest time of the year. We do a show on the Racing Post called Up in the Ante with Johnny Deneen, which somehow has kind of turned into this terrific success story and has gone beyond our wildest dreams, how successful it's been. And that's not even like, I'm not trying to blow trumpets here. I'm nothing on the show without Johnny, because Johnny is terrific, and he's just got this kind of cult fan base now where people absolutely adore him. So when that show was running, my Mondays, I generally would have a lot of Mondays off. That would be, I get one day off during the week and then one day at the weekend. And usually I would have a Monday off. Then Tuesday, we fill him up in the Ante in Dublin on a Tuesday morning. So that's always great fun. And I always think when you have a podcast like yourselves, I guess, and a podcast or a show, the best thing you can do is make people feel that they're a part of it, and that they're sitting in the pub beside you or the cafe, and that they're almost involved in the conversation, and it's lighthearted, and it's people saying what they want to say and not being fearful of the outcomes. So I think that's great fun up in the Anti-Film, and that's a Tuesday. And then I would, we call them news shifts over here. So 2 or 3 of my days during the week will be generating news. So for argument's sake, today, I'm on a news shift. So I have to ring Aidan O'Brien about City of Troy, because obviously there's only, just over 10 days to go to the Guineas. So see how his preparation is going for the Guineas. I know he's having his last series piece of work this week, so I'll chat to Aidan. Yesterday I was finishing off a stable tour with Joseph O'Brien, which was in the Racing Post on Tuesday. So that was kind of getting the horses that ran over the weekend and just updating the various things that need updating. So it's great being able to do a stable tour like that. Then as it gets towards the weekend, then obviously the Punchestown Festival is coming up, and you're kind of getting news together for that. You're seeing how the various strands are coming together. Are some of the big guns like Galloping the Champs going to be running? And then you've obviously got the big trainers battle in England, which Willie Mullins looks like he's going to win. So you're keeping an eye on that, getting quotes from Willie for his runners at Perth on Wednesday, and the various other places he's going to have runners this week. So that's my main job, would be kind of newsy kind of things and picking up stuff like that. But also I'm a features writer as well, which means that every so often, and probably not as much as I'd like because it does be busy on the news front, I get to interview some great people, and that's probably the one aspect of the job I enjoy most. I love when you have a big interview coming up and you get to ask questions to somebody you admire or somebody that you're intrigued by, and that's probably the part of my job that I love the most.
Okay, and of course today you're the other side of the fence, so I hope you're enjoying this as well. We've obviously recently had Cheltenham and the Grand National, and you alluded to it earlier on, dominated by Willie Mullins. Look, we know he's a great trainer and almost certainly going to be British champion trainer. Is it healthy for British jumps racing to have this domination, and does it bother you personally?
It's not healthy. No, it's very unhealthy, and of course it bothers me. When I started going to the Cheltenham Festival, when you think back to it, I remember, I think the most amazed I've been by a stat was when it was pointed out to me. I can't say I was the one who got this stat, but it was pointed out to me. The first 4-day festival was 2005, of course, that famous race between Hardy Eustace, Brave Inc. and Archibald and the Champion Hurdle. That was the first 4-day festival. And when somebody said to me, how many runners did Willie Mullins have at that meeting? My guess was, I think 25 or something like that. But the answer was 3. He only had 3 runners at the first 4-day festival, which absolutely took me aback. And one of them missed that one, the champion bumper. But I remember thinking to myself, how could that possibly be even right? And in the early stages, 2005, 2006, 2007, I think it was 3, 7 maybe the next year, maybe 5. I can't remember exactly. But he had 3 runners at the first 4-day festival. And you kind of say to yourself, how in the space of 19 years has just 3 runners at a meeting turned into complete and utter domination? And, there's obviously completely 2 sides to this. The main side is that you've got a once-in-a-generation talent here in Willie Mullins, and he's somebody who, does things that, like if you spoke about the kind of stuff he's doing at the moment, like 20 years ago, you would have absolutely laughed. But he's got this unbelievable ability to train a huge amount of horses, most of them extremely talented ones, keep owners happy, keep jockeys happy, keep staff happy, keep the whole thing kind of going smoothly. And how he's probably managed to do that so well, I thought it was very interesting to hear his his interview the other day at Ayr, and I can't remember exactly who asked him the question. It could have been Ollie Bell. He said, "How on earth do you manage to bring 18 horses to Ayr on a Saturday? Like, how does it happen?" He says, "Well, this happens because I completely stay out of the way. It has nothing got to do with me. If I was in charge of all the logistics here, none of the horses would get to Ayr." So he surrounds himself in terrific people. And from being in the yard and hundreds of times, you see David Casey, Patrick, all the people, Ben Delmar, all the people that he has working for him for such a long period of time, and people he couldn't survive without. He's managed to surround himself in terrific people, and Dick Dowling, who's been there donkey's years as well, and that's part of the success story. The question that you asked me in the first place, is it healthy? It's absolutely not. And I suppose the key point to make is that these big British owners, your Isaac Swade and Simon Muneers, your big British owners who should be braced in Britain, are now having horses with Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott. And, that's the key point here. These owners, why are they coming to Ireland? Why are they thinking Willie Mullins can do things that other people can't do? The prize money obviously is a big issue in England at the moment, and obviously recently, just on the eve of the Grand National, there's been talk of cuts, more cuts of prize money. Not even talk; it's going to happen that there's going to be cuts from May till the end of the year from the jockey club. So that's obviously another blow to British racing and jumps racing in particular. That prize money is going to cut even further. It's not healthy. Can I see it turning anytime soon? I can't see it turning anytime soon. I do think it will not be quite as one-sided in maybe 10 years' time, because you've got the likes of Dan Skelton, you've got really young up-and-coming trainers who are of huge ability. And I often think when I interview Dan Skelton and you talk to him, the passion that he has, it is like a young Paul Nicholls, it is like a young Willie Mullins, a young Gordon Elliott. He hates losing. These guys absolutely hate losing, and it'll kill Dan Skelton on Saturday when Willie Mullins takes the title, because it was within touching distance. So we need more Dan Skeltons. We need more big owners placing their faith in the likes of Dan Skelton and saying, right, I don't want to have all my horses with Willie Mullins or Gordon Elliott. I want to, try some of these young guys in England and see can we try and bring the two nations closer together. So that's what needs to happen. It's not healthy at the moment, but hopefully it will get healthier.
Okay, that's a really interesting insight. Now, Phil and I like to be positive people, but moving on from what you just said, and don't want to be too negative, but do you think British jumps racing is facing any sort of crisis on the back of what you just said?
I don't think it's facing a crisis. I think it's in a crisis.
Right. Okay.
I think it's right. I think it's happening as we speak. When you see the results at Cheltenham and you see where all the best horses are, and you go through all the best horses in train at the moment and see where they're residing at the moment, the vast majority of them are in Ireland. And, there's two ways of looking at Cheltenham. Like, you see Richard Newland coming out and saying that he would, stop Irish horses basically running in Britain for most of the season. That's all well and good, and that might help some of the British trainers, but then the quality of the racing is going to be so poor, and
sure.
So it's going to actually have a negative effect. So I would be really worried. I think when you see Willie Mullins winning a British trainer's title, not really trying, I think is the right way to phrase it. Like, going to Cheltenham, you'd say fair enough. Like, he obviously, all his big guns run in Cheltenham. But before Cheltenham, there wasn't even, I know Allaho ran in the King George, but that was only because he suited the race and Willie likes having runners in the King George. He hasn't been targeting the big races before the Cheltenham Festival. And it's only, since the Grand National, really, that he's got runners at meetings that you wouldn't previously expected him to have runners at, like your Ayers on Saturday, like your Perts and Ludlows and Foss last this week and Sandown at the weekend. So for him to be able to win the trainer's title by, only really putting proper effort into the last couple of weeks of the season, that's a real head scratcher. It just goes to show you it is completely all about quality. And at the moment, Paul Nicholls has huge numbers, and it's been another successful season for Paul. Like, when you actually go through the the numbers and the figures. Like, he has done very well with the team of horses that he has, and there are brighter days ahead for Paul Nicholls, because he's an awful lot of young horses. He has restocked, and I could see him having a really good season next season, because I do think there are younger members of his team who are proper Grade 1 horses. Even the likes of, Caliph de Burley was disappointing at Aintree in the juvenile hurdle, but he's not a juvenile hurdler. He's going to be a Grade 1 novice chaser, and he's one to look forward to for Paul Nicholls. He's obviously got Caldwell Potter from the Gordon Elliott stable in the dispersal sale at Tattersall, so he's another Grade 1 horse that he's definitely got. So I do think Paul Nicholls will have a good season next season, and will probably reclaim the title if Willie Mullins doesn't have a proper go at it. But the worry now is that, when you get a taste of something and you say, well, hold on a second, we were able to win the British Trainers title by only trying in the last couple of weeks. What would actually happen if we started having runners regularly on Saturdays in Britain? Maybe it could be over by the time the Cheltenham Festival comes along. And that's what I think might happen.
It'll be interesting to see, that's for sure. I was going to ask you whether there was one particular aspect of your job that you particularly enjoyed, but you mentioned earlier that you love talking to, the people in the industry, the big names. But one part of your job that obviously I'm aware of is that you regularly have to become a tipster. And I know Simon and I have to do that fairly regularly for shareholder groups and other events. Is that part of the job you really enjoy, or is it a sort of a bit of a case of sometimes setting yourself up for a bit of a fall?
Ash, of course it is. There's ups and downs. I think what you need to do is you need to realise that you have to stay level, and you have to realise there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. And just because you have a bad day doesn't mean you're an awful tipster. Even most people listening to this will probably say I am, and vice versa. I do think, like, when you're putting yourself in the public eye and you're given selections in a race, I do think you are obviously setting yourself up for abuse. And there's times where I've tipped horses and you go through bad spells and you click into Twitter, and if I was to believe everything I read on Twitter, I'm 50 stone and I'm absolutely useless at everything I do. But you have to realise that people who are making these comments and criticising you, it's a spur of the moment reaction to a frustrating that they're feeling, and you're kind of feeling it as well. Like when you tip a horse, and I often think, like, when you strongly fancy a horse, like this year's Cheltenham Festival was actually reasonably successful for me. Corbett's Cross was a strong fancy. I fancied Better Days Ahead in the Martin Pipe. So you kind of come out of the meeting going, oh God, thank God that went okay. Because I often think you're judged on Cheltenham. Like if you have a reasonably good Cheltenham, it's the one week of the year where everybody wants to be your friend on a Monday and Tuesday. People you haven't heard from all year, and they come back to you for Cheltenham. So I often think Cheltenham is a big week, and you've been talking about it for so long, and you're building up to this big crescendo, and it has to go well. So I often think Cheltenham is a good gauge. So I had a good Cheltenham this year, but last year I had an awful Cheltenham. I never tipped a winner and up in the ante. Like, I hit the crossbar a few times, but horses I really strongly fancied, like Edward Stone at the time. I always think when you look back on races from years ago, and you say, how did I even think that would happen? But I really fancied Edward Stone to beat El Fabiolo, to beat Energumene in the Champion Chase last season. And he was, I think, my strongest fancy of the week. And, he just ran an absolute shocker. And you've just got this horrible, deflating feeling after a race where you're like, oh my God, the amount of preview nights I spoke about Edward Stone, telling people why he was going to beat an Energumene, and the amount of people I've told, and people have lost money probably on the back of me thinking that Edward Stone would beat an Energumene. It's a horrible feeling, but as I often say with punting, like you've got to take it on the chin. It's not just a case of if people are going into a betting shop, writing the name on the docket and then going back and collecting it. It's not as simple as that. If that was the case, we'd all be millionaires. And I think you've just got to keep a level head. You can't get too down when you're going through bad runs, and you can't get too high when you're on really good runs. You have to try and maintain a kind of a level sense of expectations. So that's the way I deal with it. I don't personally take abuse to heart. I know certainly I do read abuse on Twitter sometimes, and sometimes people make valid points, and you say to yourself, God, actually maybe they're right. Maybe I haven't a clue. But you just have to be able to kind of just brush it off and say, tomorrow was another day, and let's kick on.
Sure. And as you know, Simon and I present inside the rails to try and promote ownership and specifically syndication. Obviously, we both run our own syndicates. Just wanted to know if you think syndication is important for the growth of racing in Britain and Ireland, and in fact, are there any differences between how syndication is sort of perceived and regarded between the two countries?
Oh, absolutely. It was the real eye opener for me was I covered the Melbourne Cup in, I'm trying to guess now what year it was. It would have been 2017. Yeah, 2017 I think it was, when Rekindling won the race for Joseph O'Brien. I think it was 2017, but that was my first time in Melbourne covering the Spring Carnival. And you just see the way they do things down there and the syndicates, and you look at the race cards and you see all the names on the various syndicates in the race card, and you say, oh my God, like they're obviously doing something extremely right here to bring as many people into the game as is physically possible. And I often think when I'm covering races and covering race meetings and a big syndicate has a winner, and you just come to the parade ring to talk to the trainer afterwards, and you see the raw emotion. And I think racing, like even single owners, like even if you think of the bigger owners in racing, your JP McManus's, your at the moment in Ireland, like the likes of Gigginstown, Noel Moore, and even the likes of Rich Ritchie, it seems to be an occasion that's celebrated best when you have your friends, your family with you. And I think that's what syndication is. It's almost like you have a family of people that you can share an experience with, and it's so much better than being on your own. I know you don't get all the prize money, and I know you don't get, all the attention because you have to share it around amongst others, but to be able to, go up into a grandstand to watch a race with your horse running, with syndicate members there, and you can share not only the highs, but share the lows as well. And you're feeling their pain when, you might fancy a horse and it runs bad. But it is a tremendously enjoyable experience. And I do think that there's a lot of work that's gone on, especially with the owners group in Horse Racing Ireland, with syndicates, trying to get back to the day of the syndicate being the be all and end all. And, because it is so expensive, like training fees, entries, vets costs, everything. Like it is an expensive pastime, and it is important to be able to share that cost. I do think it is something that we really need to get behind. And, you look at the future, like if you were to bring people in to do a survey of things that the future of racing in Ireland and England, Ireland and Britain, like one of the things they would focus on would be ownership and how to get more people involved in the game, how to get more people, interested in ownership. And I would be very much of the opinion that syndication is the way to go, because the more people you have involved in one specific horse, the better. And you never know what knock-on effect that could have. One person gets involved in one syndicate with one horse. In 10 years' time, that could be an owner going out on his own with 50 horses. You never know what, as we say, a leg of a horse or a hair of a horse. You never know what that can lead to. And I would be very much of the opinion that syndication is the way forward and has a massive future in the sport.
Well, I said earlier on that Phil and I are positive people, and clearly you're very positive about syndication. That's music to our ears, David. Thank you. We've really enjoyed having you on. But before you go, a question we like to ask all of our guests, and I'm going to put a slightly different slant on it this time. If you could change 3 things in British racing for the good of British racing, what would they be? And is there anything you change for the good of Irish racing too?
God, how long
have you got? I know.
We'll be here till May. Look, there are, like, I do a column every Saturday in the Racing Post, and I try and mix up the positivity with the negativity, but it is far easier to write negativity and things that are wrong with the industry. As regards British racing, 3 things I would change. Like there are simple things I would change, and there are tougher things I would change. Like obviously the one thing I spoke about earlier is prize money. Like at a time when basically British jumps racing is on its absolute knees, like at a time when it's really suffering, like for the jockey club to announce that they're reducing their prize money by $1.5 million for whatever 8 months of the year or 7 months of the year. Like that's really, really worrying. Like we can't like when everything else is going up, training costs are going up, entry fees are going up, vets costs are going up, everything is on the up. So if that's the case, it's just not financially viable for prize money to come down. So we cannot be cutting prize money. Take, for example, the Curragh here in Ireland. The Curragh have made a pledge in 2024 that no race run at the Curragh, no matter what it is, 50 to 85 handicap, a maiden, an auction race, no matter what it is, it's going to be not worth less than €20,000. So that's a pledge that they have made. You see what York are doing, and York's prize money is absolutely terrific. And I think that's probably, if you're to look to a race course for an example on how to lead and, the job that William Derby does there, York is a race course that every other track should be looking at and seeing what do they do, why are they successful, why have they got so much prize money, why are the crowds so good, what's going on there, what could we pick from that? And obviously you can't pick everything because it's a different place, it's a different part of the country, and they do things differently. But you can certainly pick certain things from what York are doing well and try and bring them to different race courses. I do think prize money is a massive issue in Britain at the moment. Another thing I spoke about there was owners. We need to find a way to basically, and this is obviously bad for Irish racing, I'm based in Ireland, but we need to find a way to keep the big owners in Britain. We need to find a way to get that level of competitiveness back to the Cheltenham Festival and to the Grand National and Aintree. Like when you look at Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullen's utter domination of the Grade 1s at the Grand National meeting, and Willie not even, aiming his best horses at the meeting, and yet he's coming away with, Dancing City winning a Grade 1, Mystical Power won a Grade 1. Obviously he's a very good horse for second and Supreme, but he's keeping his A-listers back for Punjasen, and he's still winning these Grade 1s with really, really top horses, but not his top horses. And Gordon Elliott obviously won 3 Grade 1s as well. So we need to try and find a way of keeping the big British owners in Britain for British racing's sake. That would be another thing. And like smaller things like cost, like in Ireland especially, I think probably Britain maybe does this a bit better, although I do think it's far too expensive for anybody to go to the big festivals. I would make it, better value for money, because I have this argument with people all the time, and they say, well, it's whatever to go to a Premier League football match, and we're on a par with various other sporting occasions. But like in general, when you go to a Premier League soccer match, apart from maybe getting a drink or getting a burger or whatever, in general it's your last cost. There are an awful lot of people who go to a Premier League football match and they buy their ticket and do not spend a penny once they get to the match, because the match is the focal point. When you go to a race meeting and you pay your admission fee or you give your ticket in, like that's only the start of it. If you want to have a bet in a race, if you want to get food, drink, your race card, it's only the start of the pricing. So I do think we need to make it better value for money to go racing, whether that means for people that pay in, incorporating your food into a ticket price, or finding a way, or a loyalty bonus. If you go to a meeting at Fakenham on a Tuesday, you get free entry to the next meeting, or half price entry into the next meeting. Something like that I think needs to work. I think that's definitely something that we need to do better, because I do think a day out of the races, if you've a husband and wife and 2 or 3 kids and you're going racing, it is an extremely expensive day out, and we need to be not turning people away from going racing. We want to encourage them to go racing. I do think we have got better with kids' facilities. I see meetings here in Ireland, and it's great fun for kids. I even bring my own daughter, and they have playgrounds, and sometimes they'd have amusements, and they might have magicians or different things organised. But I do think we need to incorporate a day out for the whole family rather than just the mother and the father.
Okay. Listen, David, thank you so much for your time. We've really enjoyed having you on.
Brilliant. Lovely to join you, boys.
Well, Phil, yet again, another great guest. Really lovely having David on. One thing that I took out of it was he didn't pull any punches, did he, about jumps racing in Britain being in a bit of a crisis. I liked his honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. David's always always good value. I enjoy listening to him on the various Racing Post podcasts that he does. And I thought he might be a great guest for Inside the Rails, and so it proved. I wanted to finish off by encouraging our listeners to get involved in shared ownership. David was very positive about that, and hopefully that's whetted your appetite. And if it has, of course, Simon and I would be delighted to chat to you if any of our horses are of interest. But if not, we're sponsored by Great British Racing, and their In the Paddock website is a good resource to find a syndicate or racing club that ticks the boxes for you in terms of price and location. And please also support Inside the Rails by following us on your podcast platform of choice to get new episodes when they're released, and of course telling people about us to grow our listenership.
Well, that just leaves me to thank our sponsors, Great British Racing, co-host Phil Boyle from BG Racing, our very special guest David Jennings from the Racing Post, producer Callum Ronan from Callum Ronan Creative, and of course you, the listeners. Willie Mullins dominated Cheltenham. He won the Grand National, and he's favourite to be champion jumps trainer in Britain. But will he emulate the great Vincent O'Brien and turn his attentions to the flat? This is Simon Double from Solaria Racing saying thank you for listening to Inside the Rails, and until next time, goodbye.
The Inside the Rails podcast is supported by Great British Racing and In the Paddock. InThePaddock.co.uk is a great place to start your shared ownership journey. Find racing clubs and syndicates with horses trained locally to you and at a cost that fits your budget using the search tools on the website. Within the Paddock, your ownership journey could start sooner than you think.